Hey guys, how's it going? I'm so excited just to be here and to share my story, what it's like to be a Christian in the middle of porn addiction. I'm going to share with you guys that as you encounter my story of the grace of God over a great length of time, far longer than I would have wanted it to be, that you can be renewed and freed from this, that it's possible, that there is hope, that you can know that you're not alone and that you can get through this. Man, I don't think I'm more passionate about another issue. So yeah, I guess I'll just start from the beginning. It's pretty much typical at this point for the average age of exposure to pornography to be when I was exposed to pornography, which I was around the age of 11 years old, I think. I don't remember like how old I actually was at the time, but 10 or 11, I think, maybe 11 years old. And as the story goes, I was just surfing the computer, surfing the web, scrolling through different websites, and I think it was like a pop-up that came up or something like that, that it wasn't porn itself, but it was kind of risque and strange. I was like, what is this? As a 10, 11-year-old kid, just didn't know a lot. And I clicked in, and it kind of led me down a path of encountering like true pornography, true hardcore pornography. That's pretty much the norm these days. And man, to tell you what that experience was like, yeah, I remember that I think it was in the evening or at night or something like that, probably later into the night. But I had just like my own little computer, I think at the time. So I was just in my room and encountered that. And I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, realizing how traumatic it was for me as a young kid to be exposed to hardcore pornography at that age. My brain at the time didn't really have any way of processing that. And that stirred up a chemical high in my brain that wanted me to like return and like seek out more of that. But at the same time, it was strange and difficult for me to even process in my body or my mind. But in that, so when I look to like, man, I want to be a Christian, I want to follow God, I want to obey him and please him. A big part of that was like, I keep going to this, I keep making this choice, this decision that is so clearly sin, and like that's not what a Christian should be doing if I want to live a righteous life and live for him. But going through my healing journey, I just like discovered that I do have a choice in this, but also I'm being severely affected by my brain chemistry, by the curse of sin and death that's like literally living in my body. And so like that was just really freeing for me to be like, man, God's grace, God loves you in this. And anyway, so we'll jump ahead to the next point of still this encounter apparently. Gosh, it's gonna be a long video, but I'll cut out what needs to be cut out. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight like the feelings of first encounter with porn was excitement. It was like a rush that I had never experienced before. I'm pretty sure like my body was shaking. So this level of intoxication, but at the same time there was this level of guilt and shame and secrecy that was like unparalleled. It was so much adrenaline rushing through my body, but like it was just this, I mean, it felt spiritual, you know, like this weight of darkness, this cloud of darkness as I encountered this, like this is not the way things are supposed to be. And so, yeah, just that level of like, this is not right was so palpable. Probably the most extreme I've ever experienced. So that was the first encounter. Very jarring and shaped me going forward. So moving forward from that part of my life, I enter into my teenage years, and again, not uncommon. This was a secret life that I was living, a secret sin struggle that I experienced in struggling with porn. And so really I was just like scared that anyone would find out. And sadly, like in my relationship with my parents and my mom and dad, I was afraid to tell them. I was too scared to say anything because I feared that in confessing pornography, something this dark, shameful, at the time it's still being like exposed as kind of like a normative thing that people struggle with, like, was I might lose their love if I share this. I don't know if they're still gonna love me. So that prevented me from sharing with them. And in a lot of ways, like, I knew that they loved me, they provided for me, they cared for me, but at another level, I didn't know if this would change things, if this would make me unlovable. And sadly, like, a lot of my relationship with my dad was lived out of fear of punishment, a little bit with my mom too, but really my dad, mainly that, like, I'm afraid, and that's how I operate with him. It's not like I'm safe and trusted in his love. I'm just a kid with him. I know he loves me no matter what. I wasn't sure of that, and that's not to blame him fully for that. I mean, it was a two-way street in that, and there's been lots of healing. I'm grateful that our relationship isn't that way, and I trust his love for me, and hopefully he trusts my love for him as well. But so moving forward from that, yeah, man, like, the entirety of my teenage years until I was 18, from 11 to 18, complete secret, nobody knows, addiction, this is just something I'm doing. So what happened during that time, maybe I was like 13 at the time, I had a Bible teacher at the Christian school that I went to. He told his story of struggling with pornography, and that was interesting because it was being talked about. I was like, whoa, this is interesting. But the thing is, as I remember it, most of what he was talking about was like, this is so dangerous. Don't do this. This is my story. And you need to fix this. You need to get free of this because of how much it will destroy your life if you stay stuck in this. So that was not terribly helpful for me at the time because, okay, will I be okay right now? Will I be loved even while I'm like in the middle of this right now? And I was like, well, I don't know. I guess I just have to fix it and get over it, and I'll figure it out on my own. At that time as well, going throughout my teenage years, I had a couple of mentors that mean a lot to me that I started to look up to and have a relationship with, and they were very impactful for my life, mainly because of how seriously they took their faith. It was real. Like, they really lived out what they believed. In my relationships with them, there were different points where I thought about coming clean about this, and I just want to confess, I just want to tell them, but my fear of rejection held me back. I was like, yeah, but what if? My heart was beating like 1,000,000 times a minute. I don't know, it's too scary. That opportunity passed by me with these couple of guys. All right, so yeah, next phase of my life. After high school, go off to college. I'm a freshman, 18 years old at the time, and I go to this university that's very like community focused, and that's a good thing to be as Christians. And I was kind of like learning more about what community actually looks like and what it looks like to try to live life together and share who we truly are with other people. Yeah, so we had life groups there where we would just get together as men on the hall and talk about Jesus and faith and stuff. Yeah, and I remember one night, after we had life group, I just thought to myself, like, enough is enough. I'm going to tell somebody. I've had so many moments of, I can go tell somebody about this, but enough's enough. I'm just going to do it. It was after a life group one night. I walked into my life group leader's room, and I told him, I confessed him. He responded very, very graciously, and that was probably the first step of healing, first big step of healing is to confess and to be received in love, and not, he wasn't pushing me away, he wasn't pushing me back, he was just listening, and he wasn't like, oh, this is so okay, but he was like, he was here, he was present in it. So after the first time of telling somebody, it got a lot easier. I still struggled, but it was a lot easier to share. So at that point, I just came up with others quite a bit easier in a not so much of an intense way, but just of kind of, I think at that point, a realization of this is more common than I thought it was, that people are struggling with this. And so it was a little bit more commonplace when, guys would get together and just try to have a real conversation. And so that would maybe come up, and we would kind of bounce a few things about that whole issue. The thing is, I will say that these experiences of sharing wasn't in a deep friendship, accountability kind of way. It was more just, more casual, more acquaintances, friends, talking about real stuff, mentioning an issue here or there, but no further follow-up connection, that sort of thing. So then I want to move on to another phase of my life, which is where I met one of my really close friends, and I just really appreciate and admire like the journey we've been on together, and like God's providence to place each other in each other's lives and to begin to be friends and to relate and connect on some different ways. Probably one of my first closer friends. And so, we met at a Christian camp we worked at, where we were counselors there, and I did some like other little work there. And then he invited me to his church, and like I kind of went, and I had a good experience there, and wanted to connect with that church and really begin attending there. And he was a big reason for that. He was a big part of that. He's just a very, very relational person, a very kind person. Was really interested in me. I think that was another thing. He's just really intentional in conversation with people, and so that was a really special thing. So we met, and we kind of just bonded over really a shared passion for like the faith and theology, philosophy a little bit too, and then about like our shared struggle with porn as well. That kind of quickly came up, and we opened up to each other in that way, and we're just really shared deeply of our experiences with it. So as we grew as friends together and got closer, we also started becoming sort of accountable to each other with this issue in our lives with porn, and wanting to check up with each other and challenge each other, love each other in our struggle with it. We were learning some new things together, and just trying to figure this whole thing out and trying to grow and overcome, but we were still like pretty entrenched in our struggles with porn. The next phase of my experiences, moving on from there, was I graduated from school. I graduated from college. So Luke and we were friends all the way through college, and then I graduated, and I was out on my own. I got a lot more independent. I was really like coming into my own as a man, as a Christian, as a person out in the world, and like what it means to follow Jesus, being like an adult, really. Like, this is it, this is life. So at that time, Luke and I kind of entered this journey of like, okay, we want to try really hard to overcome, and we're willing to put a lot of work into this, and what are we willing to do to really outgrow this thing in our lives? So that phase kind of ensued. And so we made a lot of progress. We had a lot of growth, but it still had a hold in each of our lives. So then, moving on from that experience, still being really close friends with Luke, I met a couple of new friends. And at that point, I was probably going deeper with people than I ever had been before. With Luke, with these new couple people, it was real life on life kind of stuff, like sharing deep wounds and scars, and really trying to fight well together and overcome. And there's this moment, there was a time in my experience with this that I just said, failure is not an option. I just kept trying and trying, and I said to myself, like, I'm just going to learn absolutely everything I possibly can on this subject. One thing I remember, I started getting like super hardcore with accountability software. So like I had accountability software in the past. It's a very common part of the conversation, and people struggling with porn is like, are you having things track and like block porn when it comes up and stuff? And so I had some of those things, but being extreme, I was just thinking like, okay, I'm gonna do whatever it takes. I don't care if I have to sell my phone. I don't care if I have to do whatever. And eventually I got my phone and my computer and stuff like that like locked up to a point where it was like porn was almost impossible to access. And if I did find a loophole, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna research this. I'm gonna stay up late at night and research this, how to close this loophole. And so I just kind of did that. And it was super helpful when that new experiment entered. But still struggling with lust and distorted sexual desires. I was still struggling with. But I just kept going. I just kept learning. I read a ton of books, probably like a couple dozen on sexuality and things of that nature. And that's definitely not like to prop me up. It's more just to say like, you have to get extreme about this. My friend and I did a bet at one point that we're like, okay, we're gonna try something new. if one of us slips, we're keeping each other accountable to pay a certain large amount of money for us at the time to the church if we mess up. So this huge motivator that just entered the picture, it did really quite something. For both of us, we ended up going like 2 months without anything, no porn, no whatever. And kind of what that showed me and showed us together was like, man, we're more capable of this kind of thing than we thought we were. I'm not necessarily endorsing that, because I think for us to heal and get to the root of the problem took some other work, but I do think it was like a helpful experiment for us to get disconnected from this thing a little bit. And it sometimes it takes like such a strong motivator and opposition for you to actually change. It's kind of like the guy that doesn't change until he's like, his wife finds out that he's cheating on her, and the wife says like, listen, I'm gonna leave you if you don't change. And so the guy actually like gets his act together and changes. So kind of similar to that in some ways. From that experience though, I kind of just hit a point where I finally got some momentum. I got into this streak where I was free from sexual stimulation and porn, and it was a crazy experience going through that. This is like when I met my wife as well at that time. Things in life were doing really well, and I just kind of gathered this momentum after I had a streak of like a certain amount of days and weeks and months, and then that just carried forward. Like after I began to have some of that momentum in the early days, like it just got easier and easier the farther away I got from it. And so during that time, I started to discover, and I gathered like a list of key things about like what actually happened. How did I actually break free? How did I just started gathering this list of things about breaking free? And I'll share that list with you now. Obviously I can't get into all the details of it. I wish I could, but that was really exciting for me. So as I launched forth on the longest period of abstinence I'd ever had, which was a year's worth of time, so much had changed. My life was crazy different. Felt like I was a monk or something. It was crazy. I ended up slipping back into masturbation, and I messed up after a year, but I was so proud of the accomplishment that I made, and I'm so proud of just who I've become and everything I learned and the progress, and just so thankful to God for the grace, his hand of grace in my life in that. Once that was introduced into my life, I began slipping up every now and then with masturbation, but porn was no longer a part of my life. After that slip, I had about a year until my wife and I were engaged at the time, and it was about a year until we ended up getting married. And so I had some infrequent struggles with masturbation at that time. I truly felt different. I felt healed. I felt like something had changed, something had switched. Yeah, and then there's some complexity in there for sure, over like how God has designed our bodies for sex, but then, you know, the decision to like forgo any sexual stimulation for yourself. And so there's nuance there for Christians, and people will disagree on like whether or not that's okay, and that's totally fine. I made a decision at that point that I wanted to abstain. I don't think this is right for me and my conviction, but like, if we're gonna be honest with the Bible, like the Bible doesn't say anything about masturbation specifically and sexual stimulation. It says a lot about lust. It says a lot about your mind, about what's in your head and your desires and thoughts, but it doesn't say anything about that. And so then upon getting married, like I realized in that moment, like being married to my wife, that like, oh man, like I'm actually healed sexually. It's been amazing. And from that time, like I haven't touched porn now in 3+ years probably. I'm not even sure at this point. I don't even have to think about it. I don't even have to think about temptation, like really. Like it's not even on my, like lusting sexually, it's not even a temptation anymore. And that's not out of pride or out of like, I shouldn't be on guard, because we always have to be humble and have humility in this battle, but like that just shows how God has rewired my brain, how God has worked, and how possible it is to make this kind of progress. So in sharing all of that, I wanted to share, what was it actually broke me free? Like, what was the formula, the things? I feel like that's what's been missing from the church, from my experience. Like, I'm going to get so granular and so down to the details of how I broke out. And so that's what this list is, which is very, very, there's so much to be said about all this, which is why, like, I want to dedicate a huge portion of my life to exploring this with other men and helping guys and girls to break out of porn and learn about themselves. But yeah, so here goes. The first shift for me was to encounter and believe and absorb gospel-centered theology. And what I would define as gospel-centered theology is applying justification correctly in the Christian life. Understanding what Jesus did on the cross to make me right with him right there. That changed everything. So the theological shift for me was like understanding God's love kind of works something like this, that God will still love me in porn, even if I never change, which is a very controversial statement. But I think it's true because freedom comes from a knowledge of God's love for you. So the more you sit and soak in God's love, the more you actually believe you're loved, the more you believe you're free, the more you're actually going to be free. The more it translates and transfers to obedience, into behavior, into action in your life. So it's not a way of saying like, oh, I just don't care anymore. It's actually to say that gives you the power to change. And I believe if you understand the love of God, you will change. So that was the first thing. The second thing, encountering deep relationships. There's a big push in Christian circles to like have accountability partners, to have accountability in your life. But freedom from porn actually looks like intimacy and community, not just accountability. It's being loved and known by others, not just accountability. Because accountability works off of fear. Like fear that I slipped up and now I have to tell a person. Whereas healing works with encountering community, intimacy, being loved and known. And that's a huge trigger and a pull for pornography, is that we crave connection with other people and it slips out in this distorted fashion. Next, the willingness to confess, to be vulnerable, to be humble. That's hard, but so important. The initial confession. Like, the problem's not going to get better until I humble myself to such a point that I'm willing to confess with other people, that I'm willing to be vulnerable with others. Having that humility to, like, even when you slip up after a month, you're doing so well, to just be like, I slipped up, I'm here. To dare to be that humble is part of the process for freedom, 100%. Next thing, emotional intelligence. Again, each of these points I could sit in probably for like a whole book's length, but what I'll say about emotional intelligence is how it works with porn is a lot of times difficult feelings rumble underneath the surface that we don't know how to express or encounter in our lives that lead us unknowingly to porn. So you're going through a whole journey on your emotions, honestly. That takes years though, even. It took me years at least. And I'll share some other things about like how journaling was a huge part of growing in that. And also therapy is super helpful for emotional health. Next thing, man, my gosh, so much here to this, and I only have a video's length of a testimony to share, but more to come by the grace of God. So the next one is vision. Having a vision, or the power of vision, and asking yourself, like, what is better than porn? What is far better and exceeds porn? So I got this from a book. It's just this exercise that I began to do like once, twice a day. It's called AACV, or Acknowledge, Accept, Change, Vision is what it stands for. Acknowledge, accept, choose vision. And what this actually is like what they would call scenario imagination, where you're actually going to walk through like an encounter of like a temptation. Like, I just got triggered to want to go to that. Here's me responding, walking through this. And practice makes perfect, right? Like, the brain needs to be rewired. We need to actually engage in this practice to like have new patterns. So the way it works is acknowledge. So you just imagine yourself like being triggered by porn, not in a triggering way, not in like, I'm thinking about this specifically, but just imagine yourself, whoa, I got the feeling, I want to go there. You acknowledge it. you accept that it's happening. So you face it, boom, this is happening, and to accept that it's happening. A lot of times we tend to there's a resistance to what's happening because we're afraid, because this is sinful, this is bad, this is negative. You have to accept your temptation. So once you lean into that acceptance, the next thing is choice. And it goes a little something like this. We all have the ability to make a choice every second of every day, every moment. So when you're encountered with that, here's what I would say to myself, which is a common quip or saying in recovery circles, but it's this. Freedom is not a destination, but a daily decision we make. And so what that looks like is I'm just going to choose for today to do the right thing, to do the hard thing, to press forward. Just for today. That's it. Freedom is not a destination. It's just a daily choice. I'm going to try to do all the right things today. And if I fail, that's okay too. But that's what I'm kind of engaging with, setting my mind to. And then the last thing is vision. Choose vision. And vision is use your imagination. Get into your mind and your emotions of what freedom feels like, what it looks like. Touch it. Get in touch with it. And this was such a beautiful thing for me to work through was when I started to imagine the life that I wanted. This vision. It looked like family. It looked like, the girl of my dreams. It looked like a number of different things. It looked a lot like what does it look like for me to be all that God has created me to be, the image bearer that He's created me to be. And leaning into that is so powerful. When you connect to how that feels, the desire to actually go to porn lessens a lot. It's still there, but man, I know that how it could feel if this was different. So you connect with this. The next one is, man, this is taking so much time, it's ridiculous, but that's okay, is dreaming. To dream. To have a purpose to your life and what are you dreaming about? What purpose are you chasing? That's a huge part of recovery is actually dreaming again and pursuing purpose, which is hard, challenging, to dream with God about what He wants you to do. And that's super challenging, but it's also another part of freedom is to dig into that, because when you exercise that part of your desires, it lessens this pull to something that you don't want. But a lot of guys they don't have dreams. They're just ambivalent. They're not chasing anything. They're not after anything. So of course this high is going to invade your life. All right, next one and last one is the law of replacement, which is all about habit formation and building new habits. And so basically what this looks like from brain research, people say, hey, you can't break a habit. You can only replace a habit for another habit. So it's basically a way of saying hey, you can't just subtract porn out of your life. You can't just kick it out. It doesn't work like that. You can't just stop a bad habit. We're creatures of desire. We're not able to just stop doing something. Something needs to fill that void. Something needs to fill that hole. So you can't just, okay, I'm going to stop watching porn and there we go, I'm good. But I'd rather, you do something instead. So that's the law of replacement, about building habits in place of that bad habit. And those habits for me were working out, journaling, and practicing meditation. Working out is huge. I think it's so important to be healthy, and it makes you feel good, but it's a way of feeling good that's good, that's with God's design and not against it. So go work out, go run, go lift weights. And so for me, it was a consistent thing happening many days a week. Super helpful. The other one, journaling. Journaling was huge for just processing my feelings. A time of reflection, a time to engage with, hey man, what am I feeling? I'm just going to ask that question. What am I feeling? And I'm going to spend time just sitting in that and letting my emotions speak to me in a sense and dealing with them. In that, there's a sense of release, it's a cathartic experience when you engage with that. And so in experiencing that relief, you don't need the drug of pornography to help you in much of the difficulties that you're experiencing emotionally. And then the last one is just meditation, which is basically to So meditation is the reason why this is so instrumental for porn recovery, is because meditation makes you focus, and it trains your brain to be focusing, to be attentive, to be aware of temptation, and to have the capacity to choose differently. So meditation works like this. It's you just sit, you focus on your breathing. A lot of times it's very relieving doing that. It feels good to do that and to rest in that way. And your mind will get distracted, but you just focus back on breathing or on something else. Or you just pick one thing to focus on. So it could be like an attribute of God. It could be how beautiful things are out in the morning or in the evening. You're just going to give all your focus and attention just to that. Your mind is going to drift. You just bring it back to that. It's also a super healthy way to rest as well, because we're in a culture that just creates all the time, that works, that goes, that moves. This is a time there's none of that. There's no moving, there's no going. It's just consumption. It's just awareness. It's taking stock for what's going on. So, thanks everybody. That's the full story. I appreciate just the opportunity to share this. That's what it's like to be a Christian, addicted to porn. That's my full story, where it began, how I got out, testimony of God's grace. I feel like a different person now. Totally different than who I was. It is possible, and you're not alone. And I just want you to believe that. And that's my hope with this video, is that you can just know that it's possible. And my life has never been better. Of course, I still have suffering, trials, difficulty, struggle. The grace of God has never been so sweet. Intimacy with Jesus has never been so life-giving and joy-bringing. And I'm so grateful for His grace and where it's taken me, and how far I have to go, and just how much joy God has given me. It doesn't even feel possible. But I look forward for what's to come. I believe. I'm here to cheer you on. I'm here to get in the dirt and the grit with you, as it takes years sometimes to change and to grow forward. But God's love rests upon you. It sits on you. He's not going anywhere. He doesn't change His mind about you. He loves you in the dirtiest, filthiest thing. And if your heart is really for God and you really love Him, you never have to worry about His rejection. I love you guys.